You ever notice how in any big conflict, the casualty numbers are just all over the map? You hear one thing from one side and then something completely different from the other. Well, it's not just a math problem. It's actually one of the most important, and honestly most misunderstood, parts of any war. So let's get into why it's all so complicated. Take a look at this. In a conflict involving Iran, this exact problem is playing out in real time. You've got Tehran claiming civilian casualties are up in the tens of thousands. At the very same time, Western governments are saying the number is way lower, just a few thousand. I mean, that is a huge gap. We're not talking about a small rounding error here. This is a difference of an order of magnitude.
So you have to ask yourself, right? How is this even possible? How can all these different groups be watching the very same events unfold and come away with numbers that are just light years apart? This is not a simple mistake in counting. It's a really complex puzzle, and right now we're going to start taking it apart, piece by piece.
To really get our heads around this, we need to look at the 4 big reasons for all this confusion. Think of it like we're peeling back the layers on the fog of war to see what's actually going on underneath it all.
Okay, so it pretty much boils down to 4 main things. First, there's just no access to the conflict zone. Second, you've got pure propaganda, where, let's be honest, everyone has a reason to fudge the numbers. Third, the very definition of a casualty is surprisingly blurry. And last, there's the simple, brutal chaos of war itself. Let's dig into each one. So, let's start with access, or maybe I should say the total lack of it. In a place like Iran during a conflict, the country is basically sealed shut. You can't get independent journalists in, there are no international monitors on the ground, and with internet blackouts, you can't even use social media to try and figure out what's true. So all that raw data, hospital records, morgue counts, reports from the field, it's either completely off limits or totally filtered.
The second reason is propaganda, and the incentives here are crystal clear. Every single major player has a really powerful reason to, let's say, shape the numbers. Tehran, they want high numbers to rally their people and get the world's attention. Washington and Tel Aviv, they want low numbers to avoid political heat and legal problems. And other regional powers, they kind of want something in the middle just to keep things from spinning completely out of control. So the key thing to realize is this: almost nobody has an incentive to just give you the straight, raw truth.
Reason number 3 is all about how you define things. When we use the word casualty, what do we actually mean? Are we only counting the people killed directly by a bomb or a missile? Or are we also counting what experts call indirect deaths? These are the people who die when a hospital's power gets knocked out, when medicine can't get through the blockades, or when diseases rip through camps for displaced people. Seriously, just this one distinction can change the final number by tens of thousands.
And finally, you've got the operational pace, that classic fog of war. Just try to imagine it. Hundreds of airstrikes, counterattacks, maybe even friendly fire incidents, all happening in a matter of hours. In that kind of complete chaos, there is no way, no single person or group that can accurately track what's happening in real time. It's literally impossible to get a good count until weeks or even months after the dust settles. So, if the official numbers are all so unreliable, how do we even begin to get closer to the real story? Well, let's shift gears and look at how we can try to build a more honest estimate based on what history can teach us.
Okay, so if you look at similar high-intensity conflicts in crowded cities, a realistic estimate for direct civilian deaths, people killed by the strikes themselves, is probably somewhere in the low to mid-thousands. This number comes from comparing it to past scenarios in urban warfare.
But, and this is a huge but, remember those indirect deaths we talked about? When you start adding those into the equation, people dying from collapsed infrastructure, no access to medicine, disease, that number just explodes. The indirect deaths could easily be multiples of the direct ones, and that's what pushes the true total up into the tens of thousands. It's the devastating and often hidden cost of war.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, but why get so hung up on the exact number? Well, it's because these numbers are so much more than just statistics. They have these profound real-world consequences that last for generations.
I absolutely love this quote because it just nails it. Casualty numbers aren't just statistics. They're the moral currency of warfare. Think about that. The fight over the numbers is really a fight over who gets to write the moral story of the war.
And that story, that narrative, shapes everything that comes after. If the final number that everyone agrees on is low, the whole operation goes down in history as a surgical masterpiece. But if that number is high, it's remembered as a moral failure, a disaster like Fallujah or Gaza. Two completely different legacies, and it all hangs on a single number.
So the bottom line is that this one number will go on to shape historical memory. It'll swing public opinion at home and abroad, it'll fuel legal battles for decades, and it might even create the blueprint for how the next war is fought. That is why getting it right is so incredibly important.
And that leads us to the final and maybe the most uncomfortable takeaway from all this. The reason these numbers are so fought over isn't because the truth is impossible to find. It's because the real truth is politically inconvenient for pretty much every single person involved in the fight.
You know, history shows us that the real numbers, or at least something much closer to the truth, they always come out in the end. It might take years, but they do. But the question I want to leave you with is this. By the time they finally emerge, will the world have moved on? Will anyone even still care?